Good morning, philosophers. How are you today? I hope it's well. It's a beautiful day out here in Dallas, Texas. This is the best season of the year. Okay, let's get into it. When then, he asked, does the soul grasp the truth? For whenever it attempts to examine anything with the body, it is clearly deceived by it. He's basically saying the soul is deceived by the body. And so he's trying to figure out where the soul gets truth from. Is it not in reasoning, if anywhere, that any reality becomes clear to the soul? Yes, says, who is talking? Simmias? I think it's Simmias. And indeed the soul reasons best when none of these senses troubles it, neither hearing nor sight, nor pain nor pleasure, but when it is most by itself, taking leave of the body, and as far as possible having no contact or association with it in its search for reality. That is so, I think Simmias says. And it is then that the soul of the philosopher most disdains the body, flees from it, and seeks to be by itself. It appears so. What about the following, Simmias? Do we say that there is such a thing as the just self or not? We do say so by Zeus. And the beautiful and the good? Of course. And have you ever seen any of these things with your eyes? In no way, said Simmias. Or have you ever grasped them with any of your bodily senses? I am speaking of all things, such as bigness, health, strength, and, in a word, the reality of all other things, that which each of them essentially is. Is what is most true in them contemplated through the body, or is this the position? Whoever of us prepares himself best and most accurately to grasp that thing itself which he is investigating will come closest to the knowledge of it. So he's saying because you can't grasp strength, bigness, health, etc., that the body is not the correct means of acquiring truth knowledge about it. Obviously, says Simmias. Then he will do this most perfectly who approaches the object with thought alone, without associating any sight with his thought, or dragging in any sense perception with his reasoning, but who, using pure thought alone, tries to track down each reality pure and by itself, freeing himself as far as possible from eyes and ears, and, in a word, from the whole body, because the body confuses the soul and does not allow it to acquire truth and wisdom whenever it is associated with it. Will not that man reach reality, Simmias, if anyone does? What you say, said Simmias, is indeed true. All these things will necessarily make the true philosophers believe and say to each other something like this: there is likely to be something such as a path to guide us out of our confusion. Because as long as we have a body and our soul is fused with such an evil, we shall never adequately attain what we desire, which we affirm to be the truth. The body keeps us busy in 1,000 ways because of its need for nurture. Moreover, if certain diseases befall it, they impede our search for truth. It fills us with wants, desires, fears, and all sorts of illusions and much nonsense, so that, as it is said, in truth and in fact, no thought of any kind ever comes to us from the body. Only the body and its desires cause war, civil discord, and battles. For all wars are due to the desire to acquire wealth. And it is the body and the care of it to which we are enslaved, which compel us to acquire wealth. And all this makes us too busy to practice philosophy. Worst of all, if we do get some respite from it and turn to some investigation, everywhere in our investigations the body is present and makes for confusion and fear, so that it prevents us from seeing the truth. It really has been shown to us that if we are ever to have pure knowledge, we must escape from the body and observe things in themselves with the soul by itself. It seems likely that we shall only then, when we are dead, attain that which we desire, and of which we claim to be lovers namely wisdom, as our argument shows, not while we live. For if it is impossible to attain any pure knowledge with the body, then one of two things is true. Either we can never attain knowledge, or we can do so after death. Then and not before, the soul is by itself apart from the body. While we live, we shall be closest to knowledge if we refrain as much as possible from association with the body, and do not join with it more than we must. If we are not infected with its nature, but purify ourselves from it until the God himself frees us, in this way we shall escape the contamination of the body's folly. We shall be likely to be in the company of people of the same kind, and by our own efforts we shall know all that is pure, which is presumably the truth, for it is not permitted to the impure to obtain the pure. Gonna get a drink here. Such are the things, Simmias, that all those who love learning in the proper manner must say to one another and believe. Or do you not think so? I certainly do, Socrates. And if this is true, my friend, said Socrates, there is good hope that on arriving where I am going, if anywhere, I shall acquire what has been our chief preoccupation in our past life, so that the journey that is now ordered for me is full of good hope, as it is also for any other man who believes that his mind has been prepared and, as it were, purified. This is wild. So if the body interferes with your perception of actual truth that you can only acquire through your soul's senses, which I think is being equated to like reason itself, why would the gods put you in that state of affairs and then expect you to seek truth? You know, like if they created the situation, how are you responsible for your inability to find truth? And if you're going to have, perfect contact and accurate and precise contact with the actual truth after you're dead, then why are you worrying about it while you're alive? I don't know. These are probably newbie questions. It certainly is, said Simmias. And does purification not turn out to be what we mentioned in our argument some time ago, namely, to separate the soul as far as possible from the body, and accustom it to gather itself and collect itself out of every part of the body, and to dwell by itself as far as it can, both now and in the future, freed, as it were, from the bonds of the body? Certainly, he said. And that freedom and separation of the soul from the body is called death? That is altogether so. It is only those who practice philosophy in the right way, we say, who always most want to free the soul, and this release and separation of the soul from the body is the preoccupation of the philosophers. So it appears. Therefore, as I said at the beginning, it should be ridiculous for a man to train himself in life to live in a state as close to death as possible, and then to resent it when it comes? Ridiculous, of course, said Simmias. In fact, Simmias, he said, those who practice philosophy in the right way are in training for dying, and they fear death least of all men. Consider it from this point of view. If they are altogether estranged from the body and desire to have their soul by itself, would it not be quite absurd for them to be afraid and resentful when this happens? If they did not gladly set out for a place where on arrival they may hope to attain that for which they had yearning during their lifetime, that is, wisdom, and where they would be rid of the presence of that from which they are estranged? Many men, at the death of their lovers, wives or sons, were willing to go to the underworld, driven by the hope of seeing there those for whom I can't read right now, sorry. Many men, at the death of their lovers, wives, or sons, were willing to go to the underworld, driven by the hope of seeing there those for whose company they longed, and being with them. Will then a true lover of wisdom, who has a similar hope and knows that he will never find it, to any extent except in Hades, be resentful of dying, and not gladly undertake the journey thither? I can't imagine why I'm having issues reading, with words like thither popping up. One must surely think so, my friend, if he is a true philosopher, for he is firmly convinced that he will not find pure knowledge anywhere except there. And if this is so, then, as I said just now, would it not be highly unreasonable for such a man to fear death? It certainly would, by Zeus, he said. Then you have sufficient indication, he said, that any man whom you see resenting death was not a lover of wisdom, but a lover of the body, and also a lover of wealth or of honors, either or both. It is certainly as you say. And Simmias, he said, does not what is called courage belong especially to men of this disposition? Most certainly. And the quality of moderation which even the majority call by that name, that is, not to get swept off one's feet by one's passions, but to treat them with disdain and orderliness, is this not suited only to those who most of all despise the body and live the life of philosophy? Necessarily so, he said. If you are willing to reflect on the courage and moderation of other people, you will find them strange. In what way, Socrates? You know that they all consider death a great evil? Definitely, he said. And the brave among them face death when they do for fear of greater evils? That is so. Therefore, it is fear and terror that make all men brave except the philosophers. Yet it is illogical to be brave through fear and cowardice. It certainly is. What of the moderate among them? Is their experience not similar? Is it licentiousness of a kind that makes them moderate? We say this is impossible, yet their experience of this simple-minded moderation turns out to be similar. They fear to be deprived of other pleasures which they desire, so they keep away from some pleasures because they are overcome by others. Now, to be mastered by pleasure is what they call licentiousness. But what happens to them is that they master certain pleasures because they are mastered by others. This is like what we mentioned just now, that in some way it is a kind of licentiousness that has made them moderate. That seems likely. My good Simmias, I fear this is not the right exchange to attain virtue. To exchange pleasures for pleasures, pains for pains, and fears for fears, the greater for the less, like coins, but that the only valid currency for which all these things should be exchanged is wisdom. With this we have real courage and moderation and justice, and, in a word, true virtue, with wisdom, whether pleasures and fears and all such things be present or absent. When these are exchanged for one another in separation from wisdom, such virtue is only an illusory appearance of virtue. It is in fact fit for slaves, without soundness or truth. Whereas in truth, moderation and courage and justice are a purging away of all such things, and wisdom itself is a kind of cleansing or purification. It is likely that those who established the mystic rites for us were not inferior persons, but were speaking in riddles long ago when they said that whoever arrives in the underworld uninitiated and unsanctified will wallow in the mire, whereas he who arrives there purified and initiated will dwell with the gods. There are indeed, as those concerned with the mysteries say, many who carry the thesaurus. I have no idea. There are indeed, as those concerned with the mysteries say, many who carry the thesaurus, but the Bacchants are few. These latter are, in my opinion, no other than those who have practiced philosophy in the right way. I have in my life left nothing undone in order to be counted among these as far as possible, as I have been eager to be in every way. Whether my eagerness was right and we accomplished anything, we shall, I think, know for certain in a short time, God willing, on arriving yonder. This is my defense, Simmias and Cebes. I am likely to be right to leave you and my masters here without resentment or complaint, believing that there, as here, I shall find good masters and good friends. If my defense is more convincing to you than the Athenian jury, it will be well. When Socrates finished, Cebes intervened. Socrates, he said, everything else you said is excellent, I think, but men find it very hard to believe what you said about the soul. They think that after it has left the body, it no longer exists anywhere. But but that it is destroyed and dissolved on the day the man dies, as soon as it leaves the body, and that on leaving it, it is dispersed like breath or smoke, has flown away and gone, and is no longer anything anywhere. If indeed it gathered itself together and existed by itself and escaped those evils you were recently enumerating, there would then be much good hope, Socrates, that what you say is true. But to believe this requires a good deal of faith and persuasive argument. To believe that the soul still exists after a man has died and that it still possesses some capability and intelligence. What you say is true, Cebes, Socrates said, but what shall we do? Do you want to discuss whether this is likely to be true or not? Conversation might be about to get good. We will leave it there for today. Let's see, what did I have written down for today's thought? Oh, yes. I do this often. You'll hear this will come up many times. Today I'm going to focus on appreciating the annoyances, mainly the annoyances of other people. The truth, remember this, the theme of this month I want to be truth. The truth of the people around you is that the things that are different or odd about them are usually what annoys us. Now, obviously, if they're actually like liars or fraudsters or bad people or thieves, that's not what I'm talking about. Those annoyances should not be appreciated. I just mean the normal baseline differences between people. There are personality types and things like that that annoy us. There are people that have pet peeves that annoy us. There's people that have predilections and habits that annoy us. Another example would be children. Like the state of a child is to have sort of an underdeveloped mind with shortcomings in the ability to comprehend things or to regulate their emotional state. You know, they get caught in emotion loops. They're frequently irrational. They have low self-control. You know, they're impulsive. When they think about doing something, they do it without forethought as to why it may be wrong to do or harmful to somebody else to do. So part of thinking about the truth of children and of other people that are different than us in ways that annoy us, well, is that exists, and that's part of those people. And it's not something like to be annoyed by it is to almost have an expectation that you can have one of those things without the other. Like to be annoyed by a child's impulsiveness or lack of self-control or lack of emotional control. To be annoyed by those qualities in a child is to, I don't know, hold that in some way you can separate the child from those things, and that the fact that they exist, even though they could be separated from the child, is annoying. But you can't. It's not even separate things. That is the truth. That is the state of the child. Those capacities or lack thereof is part of the child. So why would you be annoyed by the truth, the truthful reality of a child's existence? You wanted to have a kid, so you had a kid. You got what you asked for, and that's part of it. Not only that, and this goes for kids as well as adults, I think you'll find that you're going to miss a lot of the idiosyncrasies and things that bother you about people when they're gone, when they're no longer around you, when they're no longer part of your life. When you think back, often you'll miss even the things that annoyed you. This is especially true with children. You know, for 10 years of your life, plus 10 to 18 years of your life, you're going to be annoyed by the idiosyncrasies and parts of being a kid that are difficult to deal with. Having to, protect them constantly, watch out for them, advise them, be there for them when they ignore your advice and do things that hurt them or make them sad, things like that. And that stuff can feel really annoying in the moment. But when they're grown and no longer around and your house becomes empty, I think you'll find that you will miss those things as much as you miss the kids, because it's the same thing. You're missing the kids. You're missing the people. And that goes for, friends of yours that have adult friends of yours that have sort of oddities or idiosyncrasies as well. I think you'll find that if something happens that causes those people to not be around anymore, you'll miss even those idiosyncrasies, or maybe even especially those oddities, right? So what's the lesson from that? The lesson from that is today, if any of those things come up in my mind, if I'm annoyed by something my kids do or, something my friends do, I'm going to think about it from a new perspective, the perspective that, one day I might miss those things. If those are gone, or when those are gone, because nothing is forever, right? When my kids are out of the house, boy, I'm probably going to miss that stuff. So when it's happening, I'm at least going to appreciate it more in the moment and sort of, love the experience while it exists, because it's not forever. And same for your friends, friendships don't always last forever, and one day they might be gone. So you might want to appreciate these things that might annoy you now. Obviously, like I said earlier, I'm not talking about fraud or lies or, actually poor behavior. I'm just talking about, the normal idiosyncrasies that are part of everyone, yourself included. So that's just I think what I think is a better perspective on life and the people around you, connecting the truth to your expectations in the moment with a sense of the future looped in. This is kind of like a memento mori thing. Remember that you could die at any moment, so you need to be living your life such that, you'll be proud of the decisions you made and the actions you took. Well, this is kind of the same thing, but sort of associated to your friends and your other relationships of the people around you. Like, remember that you could lose those relationships at any moment. They're not permanent. So that gives you a better perspective on them in the moment. Anyway, rambled long enough. Guys, have a fantastic day.